how many of you guys heard of this country, Chad? Okay, most of you guys. Okay, I personally did not hear about this country before leaving. I didn't even know what this country was. But through my program, as many of you guys know, I'm a family medicine resident at John Peter Smith. So we get to travel internationally for our global health slash international medicine training. So I chose this country not because I wanted to go here. In fact, I did not want to go here, but because this site was the only Adventist hospital that was listed on my program. So I was thinking, you know what, maybe I can do a twofer, go for there for my training, and also maybe act like a pseudo missionary, because I've never been on the mission. And second of all, I don't know if you guys know, I'm not really well traveled. I've only been to 2 countries before this trip, and just Canada and Korea. So I actually doubled it. So don't want to go too much, so I'll just explain. So this is a very common scene that you see in Chad. I don't know if the resolution is really poor, but this is not like a poor region of Chad. This is not the mission field of Chad. This is 90% of Chad. This is what the country looks like most of the time. Even in the main capital where all the rich people live, it's several standards below our worst city, which I don't know, is it Detroit? Maybe the worst part of Detroit, that's probably their best part of that country. So who you see here is a missionary called Pavel. He's from Poland, and his 2 daughters. And this particular place is in a town or a village called Barry, where the Adventist hospital is located. A few more pictures. Wow, the resolution is pretty bad. You can get better resolution on Instagram if you guys want to follow me. More pictures of the market, but because there's so few foreigners in this country, everyone just stares at you while you're walking. It's very uncomfortable. I cannot enjoy this marketplace because people just keep staring at me, and they want to do it like they want to steal glances or something like that. They'll just look at you and they'll be like, "Wow," They'll look at you like you're an alien, And I think they've seen a lot of white people, but they've seen a lot of Asians. So they even looked at me even harder because they're like, "Oh, I don't think I've ever seen your kind," Everything in this market is super cheap. It's like less than $1. But the sad thing is, like when you go to Chad and they exchange your currency, they give you big bills. And these people are so poor, they can't even exchange the bills that I came in their own money, And so I had all these bills that I couldn't spend. I had all this money I couldn't spend because they didn't have the change for me, And I wasn't about to hand out free money, So this is one of my favorite photos. This is the prime mode of transportation in Chad, the moto taxi. This here particularly, Naomi, you'll see more pictures of her. She's a convert, is a Chadian, and she has a great story too, and invited us for a traditional Chad. I thought this was a cool picture. It's a little boy riding a little horse. But in the background, you see some, straw thatch roofs and some, like basically a hut. And this is what most of Chadian people live in, okay? This is the vast majority of houses. This is not the poor region. This is not the minority. This is what most people live in through. And no electricity. There's no power grid outside the capital, and there's no running water. Most people get their water through wells that they digged up that's been there for probably decades. And it's very unsanitary. And thankfully, I didn't drink any of it and didn't suffer the consequences. The north part of Chad it's located on the Sahara Desert, but the southern part is you start seeing change of scenery, and this is what I was, looking at most of the time. It's quite beautiful, Most striking is because there's no development, there's no light pollution, and so at night, it's amazing. It's like a blanket of stars. Okay, but I really wanted to, this is a testimony. This is not really, talking about Chad or introducing you to that. This was a significant life experience for me. I have never, been on a mission trip before. I never wanted to be a missionary. And therefore, because I didn't want to, I didn't feel like it, I thought I was not called to the mission, you know. But through this month, I kind of realized, you know, um, maybe that's not the case, okay? So a little context, before heading off, this rotation was set up a year in advance. This was months ago. But, right before I left for this country, there were certain circumstances in my life that made me feel very, very separated from the presence of God. You know, uh, Emotionally and spiritually, I think I was kind of, destroyed. And when I was heading off to Chad, when I initially chose this place, I was like, maybe I can be a missionary here. But when I was heading off to Chad, there was no thought of that. In fact, I wanted, honestly, to just be like, hey, I don't want to go. I just not in the mood for it. But, you know, whatever happened, I found myself at DFW, checking in to go, on this international flight. And that's when the problem started. Like, as soon as I walked up to the counter, I thought I gave myself plenty of time, but they immediately told me, sir, there's a problem with your ticket. And trying to explain that would go into a long story short, but ultimately, like, they had like 3 people come up to my kiosk trying to fix the ticketing problem. I never experienced this before. They were like, the first guy couldn't do it. He called his manager. The manager couldn't do it. So the manager called his manager's managers. And this process took like an hour and 30 minutes. So I only had 30 minutes to pass security and get on the plane, which has already started boarding. In my mind, I was like, okay, there were 2 thoughts in my mind. First of all, I was like, oh, maybe I can't go, So I got excited. The second part of me was like, oh, maybe this is God protecting me, because just like a few weeks ago, this is the kind of personality I am. I didn't even look into this country, I just chose it because of the Adventist hospital. I didn't even look into the recommendations and whatever. But I looked it up like a few days before leaving, and the U.S. Travel Advisory website said, Chad, do not travel. And then the reason was terrorist organizations, Boko Haram. And I was starting to freak out. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't sign up to, potentially die, on a month-long rotation. So I was like, maybe this is God protecting me. But, those are passing thoughts. Thankfully, thankfully now, but, at last minute, someone came and resolved the issue, and I just flew through security and thankfully made my way on the plane. 9-hour trip, 9-hour flight from here from Detroit to Paris, and I didn't sleep a single wink on the flight because I was too busy watching movies. And I should have slept, because when I got to Paris, it was not game over. I ran into another problem. Like 3-4 hour layover. I tried to get some sleep. I couldn't. It was like daylight there, but like midnight here. So I was tired, but I couldn't sleep. Anyway, I was getting ready to board my flight to Chad, and another problem came up. As I was passing through, they call it border security, because to get into Chad, you need a special visa. It's a dictator that runs the country, so they control who comes in and who comes out. So I had a visa already. I walk up to the ticketing desk, and they said, "Sir, your visa's expired. I can't let you into the country." And I was like, "What?" I looked at my visa, which this also shows me what kind of person I am. I hadn't even looked at my visa until that moment. I just was like, "Oh, it's there, whatever." And I looked at it, and the expiration date said May 03. Okay, I requested May 30. So where the Chadian embassy official in the U.S. made a mistake. And now here I'm in Paris, like 18 hours into my trip. I'm super exhausted, and this border police is telling me I can't leave. And I'm like, well, if you use your brains, it says here it starts on May 1st and it goes for 1 month. So this expiration date saying May 03 is obviously an error. So you should let me on the plane. And she was like, nope. And then, And I went back and forth with her on this. Like I was arguing with her. Oh my goodness, what do you think? Think with your brain. What's going on with you, you know. And but a few minutes later, I watched my plane, take off, and I was in Paris, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm stranded. I don't speak any word in French. I didn't prepare for this trip. I just, oh, I'm going. I'm just going. I didn't. The only thing I knew how to say was like bonjour, and then I didn't even pronounce it correctly, I think. And so I'm sitting there in the airport. I'm exhausted, 18 hours, more like 2 days of not sleeping because the night before I left, I was actually moving apartments. So I had no sleep. I'm so tired. I'm so done. I'm so fed up. I'm like, I'm going back to the U.S. But a little voice came into my head. I was like, why don't you give your coordinator in Chad a phone call and see if she had any ideas. So I called one of the coordinators, Dr. Trey Carton, and I was like, hey, this is my situation. You have any ideas? And the first thing she said to me, to my delight, was, hey, no one's going to blame you if you decide to go back to the U.S. And I was like, yes. But the next part, she said, but if you want to, you can go back to the Chadian embassy down in Paris and see if they can fix your visa issue, And I was like, oh, no, I was like, oh, my God, And I had some energy left, and I was like, I'm no quitter. I can't just leave when there's a potential option to get this fixed. So I got into an Uber, headed down to the Chadian embassy in Paris. He was speaking to me in French. I said a few words back to him in Spanish to see if he can understand. Anyway, so I come to the embassy. There's this really rude guy just waiting for me, and whenever I don't speak any French, so I try to say things in English, and and most everyone else I met so far in French, they spoke pretty well good English. So I was like, maybe this guy does too, but he was not having any of it. So through a combination of Google Translator and calling the coordinator in Chad, I was able to surmise that this guy didn't want to help me out. He was not sympathetic. He was just like, it's not my problem, and I was like, wow, and I was like, okay, that's it. I tried. It's over. I'm going back, And then someone else from Chad gave me a call. It's like, hey, Jason, I know you're having this problem. Well, I know a friend of a friend of a friend that can speak English and lives in Paris. And I was like, oh, great. Like, I want to go home at this point. It's been well over 24 hours since I left America, and I'm super tired. But, that voice kept going at me. Just, go at it, see this thing through. So I hit up this guy. His name was Moses, but, in French they call it Mosey. And we decided to meet at 8 p.m. It was 4:30 when we decided that, and I had 3 hours, 3+ hours, and I was like, okay, here I am, downtown Paris. I could see the Eiffel Tower in the distance, and I'm just like, maybe I could just do some sightseeing. But you guys might not have realized, but I was dressed like this. I was dressed so that I could, hike through the deserts of Chad. I knew it was a poor country, so I thought maybe they didn't care about fashion down there. So that's how I dressed, very comfortable. And everywhere I walk, these Parisians are super fashionable. I was like shocked. I was like, I've been to New York, but they outdid New York. Beautiful city, beautiful people. They're all walking around, and I'm just like walking. And let me tell you, I saw a beggar, and he was better dressed than me. I am not kidding. I was so embarrassed. So anyway, whatever. I'm so delirious at this point. I don't care. I'm just walking around. But it's cold also. It's like 50, 60 degrees daytime over there, and I dress for like 100-degree weather, so I'm freezing. And worst, and on top of that, it started raining, while I was walking around. So I had no shelter. I don't speak a word of French. I don't have a SIM card, so I have no data. And so the only internet I get is through like coffee shops. And I'm feeling miserable at this time. I'm just like, is God punishing me? Because of the things that happened right before, I came to that natural conclusion that this is my punishment. And I remember, one of the people I met there was like, oh, dude, that sounds amazing. I wish I was stranded in Paris for a week. And I was like, no, dude, I was miserable. I wanted to cry half the time. Finally, I met up with my friend, and he took me back to his home. But I remember just like the first time I met him, like, it was just like, he's a stranger, but I felt such an incredible sense of like, I felt like so much of my anxiety and, panic and that kind of feeling, just exhaustion, just washed over me, and I literally thought like, he felt like an angel to me, honestly. He took me to his home, and I asked him, hey, are you by any chance, I know you're Christian, but are you Adventist? Because at this time, I don't know if any of these people are, religious, what denomination they come from, and he was like, yes, I'm Adventist. I'm born, raised Adventist. And I was like, wow. And then he told me, this apartment that I'm in, the church is letting me stay there for basically next to nothing. And it's owned by the church, the Adventist church in France. And that night, I remember praying to God. Just, up to this moment, I thought maybe, everything that I've done so far has kind of kept me away from his blessing. Maybe he was punishing me. Maybe, he didn't care for me anymore. That's the kind of feeling I had. But that night, I remember, oh my gosh, he sent me his, servant to take care of me, to prepare my way. And he brought me into his house. And I just felt like he was wrapping me on layers and layers and layers of the church. And I remember that night, I cried a lot and asked for forgiveness, and also thankful that God, like, it felt like, the story of where Jesus leaves the 99 sheep to look for that one. And I really, truly experienced that because, I was lost. But here God was going out of his way to take care of me. I've never experienced this before, so thankfully, one last thing, that was just the beginning. Throughout the week, we went back to the embassy, every day. And this guy, he's just rude. Every time I come back, he doesn't tell us everything that he needs there, I already had the visa from America, so I thought it would be an easy transition getting a French visa to Chad. But he was making us restart the process. He has new documents that he wanted to add on, and he wouldn't tell us like straight from the beginning. We'll come one day, I'll be like, hey, you don't have this. Like, okay, great. We'll go next day to bring that, and he'll be like, well, you're missing this now. And I was like, why didn't you tell us that yesterday, And every time I was so ready to give up and go back. I was like, okay, good, boom. Doors are closed. God won't blame me. I'm going back. But I watched my friend, and he was more concerned about my visa than I was. He was more concerned about me actually making it to Chad than I was. And I saw him. He just sat there arguing with this guy, and I'm just like, oh, let's go, man. I'm done. But he was just putting into his heart. One time he called into his work and said, I can't be there because I'm helping a friend out. I'm just like, dude, I just met this guy. And he was out here just fighting my battles for me. I remember just taking a step back and looking at him as he was arguing. I was like, if this is how God leads his people, like, I think this is how he leads. He's fighting my battles for me. That's what I felt like. I thankfully got my visa, and I safely made it, back to the airport. And I had my second run-in with the border police. This time, they didn't even look at my visa. They just let me onto the plane. So here I am in Chad. This is not the capital. This is a small town. It's about 9 hours from the capital. They have terrible road system. So potholes everywhere. Half the time, it's not even paved. It's an exhausting journey. Um, this is me with some of the missionaries and some of the locals here. That's Naomi. She's right there. And this missionary here, Pavel, he has a, one day I hope I can tell you his story. He has an amazing story too. And he's been helping this lady out. And she has like 5 children, was like, her husband left her, and she was like destitute. And basically, Pavel's been helping her out. And because she was so thankful, he invited him to his house for a meal and stuff like that. And Pavel invited me. I'm just showing this picture because there's actually another missionary there. He was originally a computer science background, but pilot planes, and he's over there in Chad doing airplane mission work and also printing press. Some pictures of what I was mainly doing. I couldn't speak any French, and even though I'm not a surgeon, I basically spent my entire time assisting in surgery. So I have all these surgical skills now that I will never use again, maybe. He's a visiting surgeon. He's a vascular surgeon, but he's not doing any vascular surgeries here. He's just doing general surgery. So, very nice guy. Yeah. I thought these were cool photos. I mean, I don't know. Go on my Instagram and like them, please. So this is what we call Bush Church. The missionaries over there. We have set up a church, hospital premises, but they actually, the missionaries like to go out into like local neighboring villages and basically have kind of like a Sabbath school kind of lesson. None of these people actually speak even French, actually. No one in Chad is born speaking French. They actually speak their local tribal language, and then through school they learn French. So this guy here, he's the main surgeon at our Adventist hospital in Beret, and he speaks some French, but it's like broken French, very French. And this guy here is, the language is non-juré, and basically this Andrew is, speaking in broken French, and this guy's taking that. His French is probably not great either. I only know because I met a French missionary, and it's like, these Chadian people, they don't know how to speak French. That's a different story. But, so they're doing that, and I thought it was worthwhile sharing. And after church, we usually just go to the local river and have a picnic. These are all the missionaries and their families, and it's a great time. Tier 2 missionaries. I want to tell you about this guy right here, and he's actually the second part of my testimony. That's me with some of the locals. It's really annoying walking around town because these kids, they spot you from a mile away, coming and yelling at you, and they say that's their word for foreigner, and they just come, and I can't even walk around in peace because of these guys. Okay. So I took a lot of time. Sorry. I'll finish up with this. So that's my testimony so far on how God had led me to Chad, and I strongly believe it was a miracle how I came. But the second part about is this man right here. He's a Cameroonian, but he came to Chad 3 to 4 years ago. Chad is so poor that the other African nations send missionaries to Chad. That's how poor Chad is. So he's a missionary. He's been there for 4 years. He's computer science by trade, but he basically works as a hospital as kind of administrator and stuff, and goes around doing that. I remember after the first times he met me, he walked up to me and said, "You're from South Korea, aren't you?" And I was like, "Okay." There's only 3 Far East Asian countries. I mean, that's 1 out of 3, right? Good chances. But he was like, "I've been praying, and I know that the Bibles and the books from South Korea are very high quality." And I was like, "Great. I barely lived in South Korea, so like, great, whatever. I guess it's a compliment. Thank you." But he's like, "God has impressed upon me to ask you to see if you have any connections in Korea to get some Bibles. Because in Chad, the literacy rate is super low. And even more so than the literacy rate, they just don't have enough Bibles to give to everyone that they're evangelizing to. So sometimes one church might have 1 Bible, sometimes not at all." So he was basically telling me like the great need for those Bibles in Chad, and um, basically trying to recruit me to his cause of trying to get these Bibles. And I'm like, dude, I'm not even, I'm not in the, I'm not a pastor. I don't have any role in the Adventist church. But then he told me a story. He told me a story how, a few years ago, the hospital was desperate need of medical supplies and books and stuff like that. And he told me how, like, he was praying a lot, and he was so convinced that God was going to provide, that he went from the town to the capital 9 hours away. He just left, believing that God will give him enough money to buy what he needed for the hospital. And he told me, as he was driving up, random people that he never heard of would call him and be like, hey, I want to donate to your mission here in Chad. Some gave hundreds of dollars, some gave thousands, and some gave tens of thousands. And so by the time he arrived in the capital, he had enough money to procure a container of very necessary supplies. And he told me this story, and I was like amazed. I was like, this is the stuff I hear from like missionary, like the Adventist magazines and missionary stories. And I was like so amazed. So I was like, if this guy has this kind of faith and God has showed him this kind of miracles, I should at least do my part and, see if I can reach out to someone. My uncle is actually an Adventist pastor in South Korea. So I messaged him, like, hey, this, elder deacon here is looking for some Bibles. Do you know if there's an Adventist printing press that could possibly procure some books for him? My uncle told me, well, luck would have it, I actually live right in front of an Adventist printing press. I was like, what? I was like, this is crazy, And I told this to Charles, and then he just started praising God, and I knew my prayers were correct. I knew the feelings were correct. And then we started discussing prices, how much it would cost. It's not cheap, transporting a container of supplies of Bibles from South Korea to Chad. And so he's like, but Charles told me, he's like, God will provide. I have no doubt. God will provide. Me, I was not so sure. I was like, okay, whatever, that's your problem. A few days later, my uncle called me up, and we talked a little bit, and finally he says, my church for a long time has been wanting to donate to the African mission, and we want to donate 1,000 Bibles to Chad. I don't know if you guys are experiencing what I experienced, but I was like, this is a miracle, God somehow brought 3 people from 3 different parts of the world to, for the cause in Chad, And, he connected Charles, this guy right here, and my uncle to make that possible. And I was just amazed. I've never heard of stories like this. This was only in the books and stuff like that. I never thought I would experience it. But here I am in the middle of this kind of amazing mastermind kind of planning from God. And I could just see it unfold in front of my eyes. And more importantly, the fact that God would, I don't feel like I deserve to partake in this kind of, mission and miracles. I honestly don't feel, I'm worthy. But God was using me to connect these 2 people, Charles and my uncle, and the church in Chad and the church in South Korea. I came back, and whenever people ask me like, how was Chad, I honestly tell them it sucks. The average temperature is like 100 to 110 degrees. It's super humid. There's no air conditioning. People are so illiterate and ignorant. And it's just kind of depressing to be there. In fact, one of my favorite YouTubers that I follow, he visited Chad, and he was like, this place sucks. Don't ever come here. And he's generally a happy guy. And he's been to Afghanistan and stuff, and he's like, I love Afghanistan, So, but it made me realize, a question I always had was that why don't we ever experience miracles here, in America or in any developed country? And I think it's because we have all the resources. You know, these guys, they don't know how to read. They don't have Bibles. They don't have, basic, standards of human living that we consider standards. And so God has to act through miracles to reach these people. But for us, we have everything we need. We have great churches. We have great resources. We have Bibles. We have everything we need. So if we are struggling in our faith, it's not because, God hasn't provided. It's because, we failed. Anyway, I don't want to lecture on that. But anyway, after this, my experience, I think, I am called to be a missionary. I don't know if I can dedicate my life doing this. I like Starbucks, and this country doesn't have Starbucks. But I know it's part of my future and my career. And if God can use someone like me, someone that never imagined this, that never wanted this, I just want to say that he can probably use you guys as well. And you don't have to be doctors or nurses. The need in here is so great that, if you have any kind of skill, they need it, whether that's teaching, whether that's agriculture, whatever, these people really need it, and they desperately need it. So, thank you guys for listening.